Hello, I'm Hiller Spires. I am the Executive Director at the Friday Institute for Educational Innovation, and I'm delighted to be able to share some of my work with you today. The title of the presentation is Engaging Students in Inquiry and Critical Reading During Remote Learning. And I'll be sharing with you some work that I've done in the area of project-based inquiry global. And I've been doing this work for over a decade now. So here's our overview for this session. First of all, we're going to talk about some guiding principles for remote teaching. And then we'll talk about exactly what project-based inquiry PBI Global is. And then how do we plan a PBI Global during remote learning? And then finally, I'll ask you to think about some takeaways from this session that hopefully you'll have some strategies and some ideas that you can apply in your own classroom. So first of all, what are some guiding principles for remote teaching? As we were all making our shifts to remote teaching when COVID started, many teachers it was new for many teachers, and many teachers did not have the mindsets and the repertoire for being able to teach remotely. And so they had to learn it very quickly. A team at the Friday Institute, the Professional Leading and Learning Collaborative, along with the North Carolina Department of Public Instruction, collaborated to come up with these instructional design principles. And these have been shared with teachers all across North Carolina as well as the nation. I'm going to go through these real quickly. Some of these will make very good sense to you and will be intuitive, and some of them may be new for you to think about. First of all, instructional time. We have to think about the actual instructional time that you are trying to engage the student in and how that is designed. We have to make connections to not only our students, but also to families during remote learning, because the students are at home or some other location other than the school. And so you have to involve families. Next, it's important to think about how student engagement is aligned to the North Carolina Standard Course of Study. So how is engagement and content aligned? Next, equity, choice, and flexibility. Student choice is so important anytime, but especially during remote teaching and learning. And it's important to think about equity and, how are you meeting the students' needs, the needs of the students where they are. Feedback on student work. Sometimes during remote learning, it's very easy just to forget about the assessment and the feedback, but it's so important. And it's important to have feedback all along the instructional process, not just at the very end of a lesson or end of an assignment. Collaboration among students is so important. And how do we design the collaboration and structure those collaborations so that students can engage with each other and make the content more meaningful and the learning more meaningful? And then finally, social and emotional learning. There's a lot of discussion about social and emotional learning, especially during COVID. And it's so important for us to remember that we have to meet the needs of our students socially and emotionally in order for them to be prepared to learn. So these are some basic design principles for remote teaching and learning. And I want you to keep those in mind as we go through the presentation today. So the next question is, what is project-based inquiry, or PBI Global? As I said, this is a process that I created well over a decade now, and I've worked with a lot of different colleagues along the way to refine the process, and we've been using it with schools in North Carolina, the United States, and other countries. Basically, there are 5 phases in the PBI Global process. So 5 phases of inquiry. First of all, students gather and analyze sources. They creatively synthesize claims and evidences, and then they critically evaluate and revise whatever they're coming up with, because we know that it's very difficult to get everything right the first time. So there needs to be revisions and opportunities for the students to get feedback on their products and their work so that they can fine tune it. And then finally, students and teachers share, publish, and act. And I'm going to take you through a PBI Global process so that you can see how each one of these phases might be enacted if you were to engage in PBI Global. Another feature of PBI Global is that we have been focusing on the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals as a way to organize content and as a way, excuse me, for content for the students to focus on. And I really enjoy working with the UN Sustainable Development Goals. I think it helps teachers and students get out of their classroom and out of even their town and their state, and to think more globally. And the reason I like it is that the United Nations engaged many, many countries in order to come up with a consensus on what the most compelling and enduring challenges are for our world. And these are the 17 challenges that they came up with. And I find it quite compelling for teachers and students to think about these UN Sustainable Development Goals. And I like to pose the question: what would happen if teachers and students all across the world, not just in the North Carolina or not just in the United States, but all across the world, what would happen if they started focusing on the UN Sustainable Development Goals and became familiar with them and actually started trying to address some of these challenges? What would happen in my mind is that we would have a generation of students who understand these enduring challenges that we face in our world, and they would begin to think about solutions and probably even go into careers to help solve some of these problems. So that's very inspirational and as well as aspirational for me to think that way. Now, I'm going to show you a video of 2 schools who actually collaborated on PBI Global. And it was Person Early College for Innovation and Leadership in Person County, and then the Wake STEM Early College in Wake County. And the title of the project was Every Drop Counts: Global Water and Sanitation Issues. So what I'm going to do now is show you this video so you can get a sense of what the project is all about. And then we'll go into more details about the different features.
For the past 4 weeks, 9th graders at Wake STEM and Person Early College have been working together to investigate a co-designed compelling question pertaining to the United Nations Sustainable Development Goal number 6.
There are underserved communities. Not everybody has access to clean water.
Billions of people around the world are getting sick because of low quality water.
This is the first PBI Global that we've done with 2 different schools in North Carolina.
You are teaching us a lesson on how to work together. You are smart enough to see beyond Roxborough and Wake County. You are our future.
They get to come up with a question, they get to answer it. How do they work together? How do they deal with the disagreement? How do they come up with some sort of conclusion?
They had to overcome many obstacles related to technology, communication, as well as science content. We all know that we have to figure out things together to make things happen.
I got to collaborate with other people long distance. It also taught me about the effects of water pollution in North Carolina, but also internationally.
It is research that they want to do. They have buy-in. They have that desire to learn and to grow and to do better for the world.
The untreated water goes from this bucket down to this pump, which is pumped up to here to this sediment filter.
We have a solar panel over here which collects the UV radiation. The solar panel is connected to a 12-volt battery. It killed 99% of the microorganisms, so we were really happy with those results.
With this project and all these different things, you can learn about all these huge problems and you can find your career if you wanted to.
I'd be happy if you were all environmental engineers and scientists.
This was an awesome process. I love how our students have to get real-world research. They really process the whole PBI global model.
Nia, a character in the book, she has to walk miles every day just to get water. I don't think I could walk 2 miles with 2 gallons every day.
They can read about it, but actually having to do it and feel how heavy the water is and how their knuckles are clenching up and getting painful. I mean, that puts them one step closer to being able to empathize.
This made me appreciate what I have, my access to clean water. I think we all should chip in somehow to help out other countries.
I'm going to be more appreciative because I see what I have and I compare that to what other people have.
They've really got authentic learning.
So if we were in person, I would have us talk and discuss what we saw in the video. But you can think about it yourself. I mean, obviously the students were very engaged and you can see all of the different components of the PBI global process in action. And I like to show that at the beginning so you can go ahead and visualize what the project is about. And then we'll talk about a little bit more about the different components. Here is an example of the student products that they created and shared at the showcase in the area of the public share and act. Students put together posters. They even, a group of the students created a water filter. And it was very exciting in the showcase because the students came together from both schools. They had been working across time, space, and culture, and then they came together in one space and were able to collaborate and co-present during the showcase. So it was very exciting for them to work together and then to actually get to meet each other in person and share what they learned. You also saw, as part of the action part, that students did 2 things. They actually did a simulation where they walked and carried gallons of water so they could empathize and see what it was like and what it felt like to have to carry water. We know that in some developing countries who do not have access to water, very often the girls and the women walk a good portion of the day to carry the water back for the family. And then that also means that very often the girls don't get to go to school. So when a well is built in one of these villages, it changes everything for the folks in the village, but especially for the girls, because then they may have the opportunity to go to school after that. So you kind of have a feeling now of what this is all about. And now I want to talk about how do we actually plan a PBI Global during remote learning. The video you just saw, as I mentioned, took place right before COVID. So everyone was still talking and collaborating and being face-to-face. But how would we do this during remote learning? So first of all, I want to go back to those guiding principles for remote learning, keep those in mind. And then to get more customized for PBI Global, look at over on the right, and you can see the PBI Global design features. And these are 6 design features that we have articulated so that teachers can think about how you actually get started with PBI Global. You know, Project-based learning is a very popular way of teaching, but very often when I talk to teachers, they don't really understand or are not familiar with the different processes. And with PBI Global, which is a type of project-based learning, we've articulated these 6 design features to help teachers design these projects and to help them think through what all needs to happen. So first of all, we need to think about curriculum alignment, think about the standards, what global issue you might want to focus on, and also what would you want the students to read as a common read before they start going individually or work with teams for their compelling question. Also, you want to think about the duration of the project. That includes the instructional goals and the classroom context. We've done project-based inquiry different times. We've done it as in several days. We've done it in 2 weeks. We've done it in 7 weeks. Sometimes teachers have actually done it all semester. So it really depends on your instructional goals and what you want to do for the project. Student autonomy is also important. So you need to think about, are you going to make the project more student-directed, student and teacher negotiated, or teacher-directed? What we've found is that, the more student-directed you can make the project, the better, because students have choice and they also have voice in the process, and it helps them to be more engaged. But what we have noticed is that when you're making it more student directed, that it's real important for the teachers to provide instructional scaffolds, even when the students are coming up with their questions, because you want to make sure that the questions are compelling and that they really are big questions, so that they're broad enough and interesting enough that the students can dig into the research. And then what about the nature of collaboration? We've done this all different ways. You can collaborate within a class and just have teams within your class. You can collaborate across schools, which you just saw that example in the video. That was 2 schools collaborating across time, space, and culture, and then coming together face-to-face for the actual showcase. You can also collaborate internationally, and we have done that. We've collaborated with schools in Raleigh, and they were connected with schools in China. And so that is a very challenging process, but it's also quite rewarding. You also have to think about the student products. What do you want the students to create? We like to have them do an annotated bibliography, claims and evidence sheet, as well as digital products. You can also have them actually use materials to design products. For example, in the video, you saw that a group of students had built a water filter. And so that is another possibility for a kind of product. And then finally, instructional supports. We need to support the students, their pedagogical supports, technological supports, and evaluative supports. So all of these features are absolutely essential, and the teacher has to go through a process to think through all of these with your students in order for the project to be successful. So I'm going to go through the process of what actually happens. I think the first thing you might want to do is actually have either you choose an SDG that you want the students to focus on, or better yet, you have the students decide which SDG they want to focus on. Now, for the video that you saw, they were focusing on SDG 6, clean water and sanitation. So that would be the first thing. We've also had some schools or some teams focus on a combination of SDGs. So maybe showing the relationship between clean water and sanitation and affordable and clean energy. So that makes it actually more interesting. Step 2, Determine what students know and what they need to learn. Okay, what background knowledge and personal experiences do students bring to the project, and how do you know? What makes the SDG focus compelling for your students and your community? What are those connections that help bolster the project? And how are they going to demonstrate their learning? How do the SDG focus and students' inquiry align with the curriculum? What common texts might you engage in? And how might learning needs and learning goals evolve over the course of the project? Now, here we're talking about these common texts, and it's real important to select diverse texts. And we know that in order to support critical inquiry and critical thinking and reading with your students, it's very important to have diverse texts. So incorporate perspectives of those who are marginalized, showcase systems that create unequal opportunities, explain how to get involved in actions for social change, examine the dominant perspective that creates certain norms, and foster conversations about why certain people are marginalized. All of these are possibilities as you select diverse texts to help your students become more aware of what's going on around them in their world, and helping them develop a critical perspective. Now, in the project that I showed you, students, we had a common text of A Long Walk to Water by Linda Sue Park. And this is just one example, but it was a perfect example for this SDG 6, because the story is about, based on a true story, and the story is about a young boy as well as a young girl, because there are parallel narratives, who had challenges with water. And in this particular story, the boy in South Sudan ends up eventually, after much hardship, leaving South Sudan, getting an education elsewhere, and then decides to give back to his country. And so he goes back and creates a foundation, and he now builds wells for South Sudan. And so we were able to connect with that foundation, and the students were able to get very involved with that foundation. So it really did help bring the book alive. So after you do the common reading, it's real important, or we find that that's real important, because the student's getting emotionally involved, and it's a way to connect with the topic before they delve into informational text. So obviously, when you're having students read and read critically, you want to always think about these 3 questions. There might be others. Whose story is this? Who benefits from the story, and whose voices are not being heard? And if you can support your students to always ask those questions, it sets them up to be more critical when they read. Okay. Next is step 3, support students in developing compelling questions. Now, it's real important, as I mentioned earlier, for the student teams to come up with compelling questions. And it might be that you're having students work individually, or they might be paired up, or they might be in a team, or whether you're in a whole class, whatever the context is, we really need to have compelling questions. And these are questions that, there's not a yes, no answer. It is a question that is answerable, but it's also something that has social value. So we want these questions to be rich, meaty, compelling questions. And what scaffolds will they need to design these compelling questions? We really have found that students need help with the questions. And when you're putting them in teams, they need a process to figure out what compelling question, and to phrase it so that it sets them up to be successful. So here's an example of a scaffold for generating a compelling question. It should be something you're motivated and curious about, should be of social importance, and it should line up with the topic you're studying. And it shouldn't be a direct question that has direct answers, or it shouldn't be answered with a yes or no, or be unresearchable. So here's 3 different attempts on a particular student's question. Student team revision process of compelling question. First, is our city's water quality good or bad? And you can obviously see what's wrong with that one. And then second, what are the effects of city growth on our water quality? That one is better. And then if you go to the third attempt, how do growing urban areas affect water quality in surrounding ecosystems? So you can see the evolution of the question over time, and with input from the teacher and others for the team to come to a question that really warrants an inquiry. Step 4, support students in gathering and analyzing sources and creatively synthesizing claims and evidences. How will the students find sources? Are you going to have a teacher curated list? Or is it going to be, are the students going to investigate independently, or is it going to be some kind of mixture? And we found that oftentimes a mixture works really, really well. What types of sources will students be gathering and analyzing? Primary sources, student generated, news articles, scholarly work, all of those are choices that you and your students can engage in as you're designing the actual sources for them to work with. How will students evaluate the credibility of the source? And we know that that's a real important area, and there's been a lot of work done in that area, research done in that area on how to support students to evaluate credible sources. And I've got one slide here that's from Don Liu and his research team, and they talk about critically evaluating sources and what all has to happen. There has to be understanding. Students know when information makes sense. Relevancy, students know when information meets their needs. Accuracy, students know how to verify information with another source, learn how on the web to read laterally. Reliability, students know how to tell when information can be trusted. Bias, students know that everyone shapes information and how to evaluate this, to be able to analyze media, and to think critically about your sources. And then finally, stance. Students are healthy skeptics about online information. So all of this goes into play when students are critically evaluating their sources. And then step 5, share, publish, and act. So how will students showcase their multimodal learning products during remote learning? Will they have a remote student showcase? Is it going to be pre-recorded, or is it going to be live via Zoom? A class website, asynchronous archive of student learning products, and it could be on something like Google Sites, Wix, Weebly, WordPress, etc., whatever tool seems to fit your needs and your students' needs. And how will students engage in social action during remote learning? There are virtual fundraising events, social media awareness, engaging with policymakers remotely, socially distanced, and or online volunteering opportunities. So a variety of ways that you could do this remotely. So what I want to do now is I'm going to show you another video, and this is an example of a PBI Global that we did during the pandemic. So you will see that everything now is remote, and it's going to be very different from the first video you saw.
Welcome to our first ever global virtual launch of the PBI project. The global focus is going to be around these UN sustainable goals, specifically of clean water and affordable energy.
Globally, 2.2 billion people do not have access to clean water.
We do have a solution to this.
We're excited to collaborate with Wake STEM to learn about the impact PBI Global has on student engagement and science content knowledge. The National Science Foundation is supporting our research.
PBI Global is an inquiry to action approach.
We're hoping that we can have a generation of young people who are already working toward changing our world.
Polluted and untreated water are disasters to the environment, agriculture, and most importantly, human health.
Can everyone see my screen?
Yes.
Additionally, we're documenting how to do PBI Global with all of the challenges the pandemic has presented this year for educators and students.
Chanel is having issues with Zoom. Zoom's just not like Chanel right now. How do we want to break up the research?
PBI Global, it's very complex, it's very in-depth, and it's very well thought out and thorough.
We never find any great solution without that compelling question.
Learning how to communicate, learning how to collaborate, learning how to have that crucial conversation with that teammate to nudge them along, keep them on track.
I think we're pretty organized.
You ninth graders are rocking it.
The teachers would break it down, guided us through the project, and we all had each other's back, and it was really fun.
Group 1, you guys can go ahead and take the screen. Morning, Miguel.
Good morning. The question we're dealing with today is how does solar energy impact availability and sustainable management of clean or potable water for all? This is our model, and it may seem confusing at first, so let me explain. Solar energy is absorbed via our solar panel and turned into heat. At night, all of the water cools down for the people to come and pick up their fresh water the next day.
In America, we take a lot of things for granted, and we should be more happy of what we have.
4.5 billion people around the world have no toilets at home, and people get sick. It's not just sub-Saharan Africa, places like India, but actually here at home.
It gives me like a broad knowledge of all the problems in the world. Like now, whenever I turn on my tap, I just think, oh wait, there's other people that don't have water. And then I start thinking about ways I can help them. It gives me like more acknowledgement and like enlightenment towards that. I want to go in something towards engineering, and I hope that I would be able to help other people.
You can do some things at home. It doesn't have to be a big fancy lab.
One person can come up with an idea, but a lot of the times they don't see all the aspects of it. So we really had to get everybody working together.
Before PBI, I didn't know anything about research or what research really was.
The light bulbs come on, they're asking questions, they're seeking knowledge.
There were those moments where it's kind of getting down to the wire, but our group came together and pulled off a pretty great presentation.
The flowing water will then power a hydro turbine.
Really doing a deep dive into solutions.
This is authentic learning at its best. Okay, so that was an example of a school. In this case, it was Wake STEM Early College High School, and they did a PBI global process with the whole ninth grade, and it was during remote learning. So you could see how different it was from the one that we did in 2020. And I just want to end here by asking this question: why PBI Global now? And I think that the former UN Secretary General has a great answer for this question. Be a global citizen, act with passion and compassion. Help us make this world safer and more sustainable today and for the generations that will follow us. That is our moral responsibility. I'd love for you to take about 60 seconds now and just think about, maybe write down 1 to 2 takeaways from what I've shared with you today about Project-Based Inquiry Global. What 1 or 2 things did you take away that resonate with you that you think you could actually do in your classroom? And, you know, if you're teaching elementary or you're teaching middle school, you would have to think about how these projects would translate to different age groups. But just think for a few minutes, or really just about 60 seconds. And I'm gonna wait and let you write those down so you'll have something written down. Okay, I hope you have a couple of ideas that you can take away. Here are some more resources that I have about the PBI Global process, actual research that we've conducted that you can look up. And if you go to YouTube, if you look under my name, Hiller Spires, I have a YouTube channel, and I have many PBI Global videos, the ones you saw here, as well as other PBI Global videos that you can watch if you need some more examples. So thank you so much for joining me. I hope that it was informative. Feel free to check out our New Literacies Collaborative on Facebook and on Twitter. I use the hashtag #NewLit for New Literacies. You can also follow me at the Friday Institute, and you can follow me at HA Spires. So feel free to check out some of the work that we're doing. And I would love to hear from you if you try some of these ideas, or if you have more questions about it. Please reach out to me through email or some other way, and I would love to share information with you. So thank you so much for listening, and I hope you have a great conference, and feel free to reach out and get in touch with me. Take care.